Good evening and welcome to Zion's Banner. It looks like some folks are starting to gather together already. Um, Actually, I almost feel like saying welcome to another broadcast during the zombie apocalypse. Now, fortunately, it isn't really a zombie apocalypse, but for many of us who are stuck in our homes and beginning to feel the weight of this, it may indeed feel pretty incredible. And I feel like I've lived many days in the last few days. The scenes here are continuing to change on a rapid basis. Uh, Originally, I was concerned about how I was going to be able to be with you all while I was in Vermont. I will not be in Vermont at all. The way things look, um, that's not going to happen. I am going to take just a second here as I look at myself and go, ooh, this lighting is not right because the sun has gone down even in Vermont. There we go. Sorry about that brief moment, but the sun has actually set in Vermont. I mean Arizona, and this is a little unprecedented. But we do not do daylight savings time, and so let's see what we got. There we go. Um, we don't do daylight savings time, so I have to get used to the fact that things are changing even here. Um, as opposed to the rest. I am thrilled to have Nate in the room, one of our awesome moderators, and he is just there, and that is great. I've been thinking a lot about deliverance. I don't know about you, but things are really intense. We spent time, for those of us who are connected with Chosen People, doing a complete total staff call across the country. Uh, Things are happening to missionaries just as they're happening to you. And so I'm going to go ahead and let you know about a few things. You should see a card up. One of the things they told us we could do since we can't go on tour is that we could do a virtual Messiah and the Passover Seder. In fact, some of the folks are a little less familiar with broadcasting than me, and they're going to make some things available to actually allow for that via Zoom. Maybe ManyCam would work so that I could simultaneously broadcast it to both YouTube and Facebook. Now I'm waiting for from the office on materials that they would like us to do, but they want us to make use of their awesome new tools. So I'm going to show that. Now, many of you in the community are already supporting us, either Patreon to support these actual broadcasts or actually through Chosen People. But they want to use the electronic cards because there is nobody in the office. And so mail has been hampered a little. And so they're encouraging the fact that even though no one's in the office, the electronic still works. And so that may allow us to even do something with Zoom and something online, or even with another app I have. We could do a chat room, we could do a Messiah in the Passover, we could do a bunch of stuff. And so they're encouraging us to go ahead and put that up there. If you already support us via Patreon or Chosen People, that is fine. This is just electronics to make up for the fact that the office is closed. New York is virtually on lockdown. There is a lot going there. I wanted to put that up. It also electronically ties you to our newsletter. I am considering calling supporters up or Skyping or Zooming with them just to see how you guys are doing because you've got to be going through some stuff too. And I'm concerned for you. And I would not mind just personally getting a few of you on Zoom, even one-on-one, and doing some Zoom calls or something, and just praying with you. You guys are such an awesome community, and you know, uh, I'm glad that you can have clapped hands here on the broadcast, and you don't have to worry about whether you washed them or not. So that's really exciting. We're going to talk about deliverance tonight because really this is turning our world upside down. And we're better than to go to the Bible. And since I did not do a Purim broadcast, and my mind has huddled back to the issue of deliverance and God's protection, I thought, because it is not yet Passover, that we could do a belated Purim broadcast and tie this into what this means for God's people today as far as deliverance. And so that's what I am going to end up doing tonight. So you're getting Purim late, but really you're getting Purim at the appropriate time, because we desperately really need to rely on God to deliver us from the present situation. And so this is an applicational message from Purim that I think is very useful to us. And so that's what I'm going to do. I don't know how these broadcasts play. We'll get back to the apologetic stuff related to apologetics and just plain Bible teaching. But sometimes we just have to turn back to the Word of God and look back at history the way the ancient Israelites did. And that's what they would do when they were in a tight spot, is they were to rehearse their history. And I thought, we probably should do the same thing. Let's rehearse common biblical history and see if we can get something from it for today. So I'm going to switch over here and I am really, really happy for those that are here. Now, the folks that aren't, that's okay, because, see, since you're stuck home, you can listen to this anytime you want, because it's up there and it doesn't go away. And so that's also neat, because this particular medium allows for that. So let's start talking about Esther. We've got the PowerPoint up there. PowerPoint was made somewhat available. Now, some things are running a little late because I've had to do some damage control. But you should see a link possibly in the description. And also, I think my Zion's Banner Facebook page should have that. I will double check. If it is not there, I will make that available. I'm sorry about the lateness of this. I had other plans for this week. I really did. I thought we'd be doing other messages. I thought that I would be getting ready to get on a plane, and our spring tour was curtailed. And so this was a message I was going to do in Vermont, because one of the pastors said, we don't want a Messiah in the Passover. We want a Bible message. And this was just starting to heat up. And so there have been changes, but that's okay. We're going to roll with the punches tonight. We're going to visit the book of Esther, looking at this book in God's big story as far as deliverance. Now, when we start with this, we have questions that we ask that are not related directly to the coronavirus, but they're related to understanding our Bibles. And so we're going to understand our Bibles. We're going to get a feel for what Jews do today with Purim. So you can have a little bit of information on Jewish culture, which is really cool and something that I deal in. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at some things related to making application and how we can go ahead and do that. The first issue is the issue of canonicity. Why is this an issue for the book of Esther? The book of Esther was debated about being in the canon. Now, let me explain what that means. The canon is the measure of books that are part of your Bible. Other books were written. I do not include the Apocrypha in my Bible. I know at least one brother joins us might want to argue that point, but I do not regard the Apocrypha as inspired. I regard it as useful. It gives us a lot of history. It helps us understand how Jews thought about salvation, redemption, covenant during that time period. E.P. Sanders made much use of it in his writings to better understand what Jews were thinking at the time. And so it is useful, but inspired means something more. It means that God literally superintended over the book so that it is giving us doctrine, it is giving us knowledge of Him that is from Him and is not a human product at all, even a good human product like, say, Shakespeare. And so there is an issue about canonicity. Now, where this came up in our culture was the Da Vinci Code. I don't know how many of you remember that. I'm not going to say that you saw it. That will be between you and, if you wanted just the apologetics information, you went to watch it to see. Maybe you're just a Tom Hanks fan and you just had to see Tom Hanks and get your fill of Tom Hanks. But this postulated that the Council of Nicaea, essentially, and the church decided which books were in our Bible through some sort of conspiracy. This will come up every year when they have Elaine Page on to do the Gnostic Gospels right around Easter. I find that really sad. But a lot of the public radio stations just have to do this thing. Esther was almost not included in the canon. Well, why was that, you may wonder? There is no direct reference to God in the book of Esther. One of the things that Jews looked for in terms of an inspired book is that there was reference to God in it. They thought that that would be pretty normative for a book written by God to state something of it came from God or that God was indeed referenced in the book. That made perfect sense to them. It's God's book. Why wouldn't he be referenced? And so there's no direct reference. There's no specific prophet associated with the book of Esther. Now that's important. Prophets were responsible to give the revelation of God to man, and so usually with a Bible book, there will be a specific prophet. Now, that's not always true, but it is true a whole lot of the time, and so it was a general expectation that this would normatively be the case. The book of Esther held a historically marginal position in Jewish and Christian communities because of the absence of certain religious elements and other things. Now, that doesn't mean it was included in the canon. It means that this book, people ask questions. There were a few books where they said, well, should we or shouldn't we? It's not as clear cut to us as, say, the book of Jeremiah. And so they said, should we include the book of Esther? Now, it was decided the book of Esther should be included, but I just want to let you know that it was indeed questioned. Hey, I am thrilled. Australia, our dear sister from Australia, is pleasant. And she mentions that it's an autumn day, which I find humorous because it's a spring day here. So that's just kind of funny. But we are international. I love this. We're international. That's exciting. And so we were talking about deliverance. I immediately went back to the book of Esther. I did not do a Purim message, and boy, do we need a little deliverance. And so I thought, well, this will be a belated Purim message, and also it's not quite Passover yet. I also mentioned that I'm willing, and the office encouraged it in New York, for us to do a virtual Christ in the Passover, either through Zoom or through another means. And so I included a poll card. If there are people that would be willing to join me for a virtual Passover, I'm not doing any during this spring tour because our spring tour was canceled. I can invite supporters and I can invite us, and we could come into my dining room and we could do this as a presentation. And so if you're interested, you can just let me know. But I'm getting a feel for like how many virtual folks would electronically be with us. Because it would be good to do this with a little bit of an audience and share this with you. And I'd love to do that. And I can give information so that you could actually have the elements, possibly, given the way stores are here, but you possibly could have some of the elements and we could even have some participation. So I've got one real positive yes. I will be getting information from the office. One of the problems is Zoom. Zoom may be the better way to do this because then I can actually interact more, but we'll see which way we'll go. But if you guys are familiar with Zoom at all, just let me know because I want to know which platform to use. The office tends not to use Manycam. They have a lot of Zoomites. I like Manycam because I could stream this to Facebook and YouTube at the same time. Keeping our fingers crossed and praying that God causes the high speed to do what it's doing. That's just a little side announcement, but I want to share this with the folks. If you're listening to this later and you're interested, there's a poll card up, and so let me know. But I want to put this and make this available. That's a side note because we had a few folks join us, but I want to put it. Excellent. I will look at the chat later, and I will let the but I will talk about this. Esther was included in the canon. And so that's why we're dealing with it. Esther is a particularly important book, but I wanted to give you the issues around it. Why did it retain its place in the canon? The church fathers were certainly convinced. Norman Geisler points it out that the authority of God was behind this book, even though it's less observable. The book appears as one of the 24 books listed in the Talmudic work, and so it's included. And the Targum, there is Targum material, that's Aramaic translation material. And the Targums were used in Jesus' day and included the law, the prophets, and the writings, and can extend to the book of Esther. So there were reasons for including it. And so we're okay to regard this as scripture. We were anyway. But let's just say that God left enough evidence to let us know that he wanted this book in our canon, even though it was disputed. So if you hear that it was a disputed book, and you get a note electronically from Tom Hanks to that effect, you will know not to regard that. Okay? Let me tell you a little about what Jewish people did do during Purim, and I will admit that usually at Hillside we have a Purim party. In fact, once the pastor got to be King Xerxes and his wife got to be Esther. And boy, did they ever ham it up. They were great. Um, we ended up doing that. We had stuff for the kids and the noisemakers. Let me tell you a little about what Jewish people do during this holiday, even though it's past, because I want you to have the background. Um, the story of Esther is read in its entirety. It's called the Megillah. It's actually read entirely through. We're not going to do that tonight, and I did not provide noisemakers for you. However, I wouldn't mind doing a virtual Purim reading next year and seeing if you guys get noisemakers or tin cans or something that you can clank, and we could do it the way they do it. That'd be fun. Um, Children dress up like the main characters. In Israel, this is sort of Halloween. They don't have Halloween, they have Purim. In New York City, I saw a bunch of little Mordecais and Esthers all over the place. And so there were Esthers and Mordecais. I did school and I board near the Hasidic neighborhood, and the kids will go out, and there was candy. There's supposed to be the giving of charity and the sharing of gifts. Um, for Jewish people, this came closer to Halloween than Halloween did. Now, Jewish people have been westernized to an extent, and we kind of take part in apple pie, Chevrolet, and all that great stuff. If you guys get the reference, and so there's a little bit of a change there. But in Israel, this is still the bigger thing. Um, when this book is read, every time Haman's name is said, you yell boo. Okay, thumbs down, boo. Okay, because he's the villain. Okay, when Mordecai or Esther are named, yay. Okay. And so that's what they do. They read the Megillah of Esther. Now, real Orthodox Jews will fast right before Purim because Esther asked that the people of Israel would fast. Um, Again, there's the giving to charity, because at the end of the book of Esther, Mordecai declares a holiday and then says there should be the sharing of gifts. And so this is still a time when Jewish people give to charity. Kind of interesting in light of the fact that this Purim was a little different. Um, and I really feel that this is important because for such a time as this, it is worthwhile to go through Esther. The Ashkenazi Jews who are from France, Germany, Eastern Europe, and I'm trying to think of whether it's an Israeli custom. And I will be honest, I grew up incredibly Ashkenazi in an old Jewish Ashkenazi neighborhood with an old Ashkenazi Jewish grandfather and grandmother who I would walk to shul with when I went to synagogue. Shul is a Yiddish way of saying synagogue. I'd go to shul with him. And I remember that. And so we would come home, and during this time of year, we have something called Hamantaschen. Hamantashen is not matzah. I went up to do a Christ in the Passover, and the guy said, "Yeah, we have all the hamantashen done for Passover," and we were like horrified because during Passover you don't eat leaven. Hamantashen is a cookie. It's a three-cornered cookie. Hamantashen literally means Haman's hat, and it's filled with fruit, like dried, like apricot preserves or poppy seeds were really big when I was growing up. I loved poppy seed hamantashen. I still remember the flavor. It's funny because Jewish holidays, there are just certain flavors and smells that you remember because, with the exception of Yom Kippur and certain other fast days, and even when you break those fasts, there are things that you traditionally eat, and those become part of the holiday, part of the memory when you're a kid. And so I still like could smell these things and taste these things, and they just evoke these memories. And that's what God did. He set these things up often to where there were certain experiences that involved the senses. But that would be something I'd point out at a Messiah in the Passover, because there's a lot of that there. Um, this is what's associated with this: the dressing up, the telling the story, the noisemakers are called Gregors. The yays, when Esther and Mordecai's name is meant, you almost can't keep up with the story when you're doing this. And then the Hamantashen. Okay, uh, you're going to see kind of a double picture there, but really that's supposed to be a Megillah of Esther. That's a very beautifully calligraphy from long ago, and you'll see that it's separate. This is one of those writings that is read during the Jewish holidays. Song of Songs is read on the Sabbath, I believe, before the Passover. There are certain of these that are just associated. These are extra readings that are done. This is a story of deliverance. Wow. Uh, it is not part of the prophets. It's really sort of a companion book to Daniel in a way, and ties in closely with Ezra and Nehemiah, and it sort of connects Daniel with Ezra and Nehemiah time period wise, because Daniel's in Babylon, Ezra and Nehemiah are about the exiles coming back, and Esther's right within this time period. Daniel was written to explain how to live in exile. How do you live in exile? How do I maintain my faith in a foreign pagan environment? Might be fun to do, Daniel, someday. It's very eschatological. I don't mind eschatology, but it tends to breed deep discussions among Christians and followers of Messiah. Esther is about how God protects his people even when they're under some disfavor covenantally. So Daniel is about how to live, and Esther's about even when you're out of the place of blessing with God, he will still protect his children. And he will still keep his promises. Now, let that resonate with you for a few minutes. Okay, I'm not saying you're out of covenant with God or anything. What I'm saying is let the fact that God still protects his children, even in hard situations, let that wash over your heart for a minute or two. We'll get back to that, but in the back of your mind, connections should start being made, right? You should start being able to see the applications for us. Um, we are dealing with this in 4 parts. Now, understand that if you have your book of Esther open, I'm not reading the whole book of Esther. That's 4 chapters tonight. Good question. Let me take John's question a little later. I appreciate your questions, John. It's just very hard. Again, I want to edify people too. So I'll take your question, but I want people to get something out of this during this present crisis, if that's okay. And so I'm going to do something in order. But I think there's something edifying here that we may be able to get from this. And it's been quite a week for me. So let me go ahead and do that. Oh, I love these questions, guys. Let me get to those because one gentleman asked, "What do I think about a Jewish bride marrying a Gentile husband?" And in Ruth, it's a Gentile bride marrying a Jewish husband. Is that commentary on the body of Christ? Oh, I want to go back to that question, brother. I really want to go back to that question because that's a juicy, incredible tidbit. And so I'm going to go back to that. I've got that in my comments, and I'm going to go back to that. And then John asked, "How do we know the book isn't written about the acts of men?" And I want to go back to that too because God, and you're going to get some answer to that because there's something unique as a feature in Esther that I'm going to get to. Okay, but I'm going to go back to that because that's a juicy question too, and I want to take that question. But I want to take it because some of that may be answered in the commentary. Um, What is the charge against the Jews that is raised by Haman to Xerxes? I learned to call him something a little different than the Greek. But then again, I learned to call a lot of Gentile kings something a little different than the Greek, sometimes more pleasant than others. So we'll leave that not repeated. um, what were they supposed to do? What was the charge against them? What were the people? What were these people in exile? Um, what were these people in exile supposed to do while they were in exile? They were given a charge by God, and then Haman's going to give a charge against them to Xerxes. They were told by God to seek the peace of the city. That being in Babylon, they were originally sent was the beginning. Um, They were told in Jeremiah that they were to go out if they were faithful, accept the exile as a discipline from God. Their lives would be given to them, and they were to seek the peace of the city while they were exiled. And so they weren't really threats to the society. Now, Haman's going to say, these people have different laws than you, O king. These people are different from your other people. They're a threat. But really, the charge given to them by Jeremiah was to seek the peace of the city. And so, really, they were no threat. Now, that's interesting for us. For us who are citizens of heaven, this is not our ultimate home, is it? But what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to seek the peace of the city. And you're right. Someone saw Haman's name up there and they said, boo, they're right on target. Because when you see Haman's name, you'd say, then Haman, and everyone would go, boo, said King Ahasuerus. There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces, and their laws are different from all other peoples. They're weird. They're strange. They're different. They're scary. And they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore, it's not fitting for the king to let them remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they be destroyed, and I will pay. Look at this. He's paying for the privilege of killing them. Isn't that nice? 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those that do the work and bring it into the king's treasury. Now, there's some background here. Haman loves himself, and Mordecai wouldn't bow to Haman because Mordecai knew that he was only supposed to kneel and give homage to God. And so Mordecai ends up doing that, and Haman doesn't like it. And so Haman decides to go ahead and accuse the Jews. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, okay? I honestly believe that there's an accuser of the brethren. Aha. Somebody raised the Agag question. We're getting there. We'll get there. Someone asked about King Agag. And if he was destroyed, how can Haman be an Agagite? This is a very important point in Esther. Something really neat happens in Esther. I'm so glad that someone raised that. We got to get there. Okay, because really, I think I've got some stuff in the slides. Okay. If you want to understand this, well, let me give you a quick answer. Can I give you a Jewish quick answer? There's the long answer and the quick answer. We know that the king of Agag was destroyed. Okay? Do we know that all the women of Agag were destroyed? Because it only takes one pregnant woman to have a child. particularly if she's pregnant before the husband's destroyed. Okay, I mean, there's a little lag time here. So if you had the king of Agag and he ended up having not just one wife, but maybe a few, because that wasn't totally uncommon here, you know, and then some female servants here, because we don't have to be totally ethical. Maybe some of them got pregnant, but you know who doesn't destroy the king of Agag? Uh, Saul of Benjamin. So we're going to talk about that because Mordecai is related, and I believe that's in this PowerPoint. But remember, you only need a pregnant girl to have a little Agagite, and then that Agagite could grow up somewhere else if they flee, escape, or whatever. And then if he grows up somewhere else, then he can go ahead and still hate people a whole lot. And that's why God often destroyed entire cities, because as barbaric as that sounds, and neo-atheists pick up on this all the time, what you don't understand is what blood feuds were like in the Mideast and in the ancient world. Like, you killed my third cousin 3 generations back, so I'm gonna annihilate your family when you're not looking. Okay, these are ancient people, and I'll tell you a secret about ancient people. They have long memories because they've been around a while. So we get really excited with a 50s diner, but that's like nothing compared to ancient people. And if you think that doesn't tend to happen, you could check out the troubles in Ireland here that go back a few centuries, and some Scottish history. The more you're dealing with people with long unbroken histories, the more this sort of stuff happens. Now, I'm not saying it's all bad to be an ancient people, because it means that you have a rich heritage, but sometimes it means you have some real angst that has been passed down for a long time. So, does the Bible specifically say that every last Agagite, male and female, were ultimately and totally destroyed and none escaped? Well, I haven't found a verse like that. And just knowing my family and having 5 kids, I kind of know how this works. And so that's kind of my short answer from a Jewish perspective is we got to be careful about saying more than said there. So letters are sent out all over the place. Okay, that's Esther 3, 13 through 15, to destroy, to kill, and annihilate all the Jews. Wow, that's pretty intense. How many words does it take to say eliminate? Both young, old, children, and women. See, this decree says nothing's left alive. In one day, this is going to be a total bloodbath. On the 13th day of the 12th month. Now, that's the month of Adar. Yes, there are older names for Hebrew months, but there are also double names for Hebrew months. I'm kind of glad of that because I like my Hebrew name, and I like where it comes from and what it means, but it isn't the original name for the first month. The original name for the first month had the idea of, kind of a green, or, the spring, and it was Aviv. The month coming up for Passover is Nisan, and it's related to the word Nisai, or banner or sign. And I could tell you a story about my mom's naming of me and giving me my Hebrew name, but that probably wouldn't help you feel necessarily as edified as it excites me. But it is kind of neat. God providentially chose not only my English name, but I believe that God providentially chose my Hebrew name. So that's kind of interesting. To plunder their possessions. The document was issued in law in every province and was published for all people that they should be ready on that day. Couriers went out and hastened to the king's command. This PowerPoint could have the background a little bit lighter, I realize, and I'm working on those things. But man, that scroll of Esther just looked too cool to me. I have that problem. Sometimes I fall in love with the pictures. I go, wow. And then I just have trouble muting the background because I'm just so awed by the artwork. A decree was proclaimed in Shushan, the citadel, so the king and Haman sat down and drank, and the city of Shushan was perplexed. Ooh, what is this? And so they're all perplexed. You'll notice that this particular verses here don't have Haman or Esther's name, so there's no need for the boo, and you don't have to do the yay quite yet. Achashverosh promoted Haman, son of, and now here it's mentioned that he's an Agagite. That's why our dear brother said if they were all killed, how are there any Agagites? Because he's picking up on this fact, and I appreciate that. He advanced him above all the princes. Now, here's the funny thing to me, okay? This is really kind of neat. And I pointed this out. Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep and oxen and lambs, and all that was good. They were unwilling to destroy, but everything that was despised and worthless, they utterly destroyed. Now that's Saul. Mordecai is going to be involved with this. Now let's look at Mordecai's background here. Okay. Whoops. I should have included. Mordecai is a direct descendant of Saul. Remember, Saul dies, but not every son of Kish and every relative of Saul dies. Okay? And so what's interesting about this is what Saul fails to do, Mordecai does. And at the end, I'm going to make a point about that because I think that's really, really cool and important. Now, here's the dilemma, okay? Mordecai, of course, reads this thing because it's given all over the place, and he's quite upset. And it talks about him wearing sackcloth and ashes, and then mourning, and then it's picked up that he's like walking around like this. Okay. By the way, yes, Samuel does do what Saul is not going to do. Okay. And it's pointing out that Saul does it when Samuel says to do it. But Saul doesn't do it at first. I mean, that's the problem. Samuel comes and says, "Is that the lowing of cattle that I hear?" Okay. And the point is, if all the sheep were dead, I wouldn't be hearing a whole lot. And so, Samuel basically says God's really displeased, and then Samuel really wants to kind of get in good, and he does what he's supposed to do afterwards, and that's the point. And so, what Saul wouldn't do, Samuel gets him to do. So, if I gave another impression, sorry about that. But John here is throwing up the verses for us. Agag there is the king of the Agagites. Okay. Again, there are people associated with a kingdom, but we won't go too far there. Esther speaks to the eunuch in charge and gave him a command for Mordecai. All the king's servants and peoples know that there is no man. Now, see, here's the problem we got. Okay, John wants to continue to talk about this, so I'm going to go ahead and deal with it. Okay. And the point is, when the Amalekites were supposedly destroyed, here's the thing. Why is there a king of Agag during Saul's day if all the Amalekites were destroyed during the battle with Joshua and Moses? I think we just need to kind of understand that we're dealing with large groups of people and subsections of those groups and confederations that we're ending up dealing with. Moses' wife is referred to as a Midianite. Jethro is referred to a Midianite. Some Bibles talk to her about being a Cushite because of the migration of the Midianites. And so that's where that kind of is. And so I'm going to go ahead and say from Moses to Saul, you must have had somebody surviving because you wouldn't have a King Agag if they were all destroyed during Moses' day. And see, because I believe in the inspiration of the scriptures, my answer to these things is you need to harmonize passages, not use passages against each other. So the question is, how do these passages relate to each other? And what's the key as to what's being said together as to how both passages fit? So I don't start with the assumption that there's a contradiction. I start with the assumption that I have to figure out how these things fit together, and there is no contradiction. It's just a matter of me finding it. But I do want to leave us with something edifying tonight, because, I know, but some Amalekites certainly lived until Saul's time. And then Agag is killed, but it doesn't necessarily say that all the Amalekites surrounding him were killed in the passage related to Saul. And that's the point. You also have to know that the same names are used over and over again. Like, let me give you an example. Some of the disciples, how many Johns are mentioned? Okay. Well, Yohanan was a popular name. Do you know there were actually other people named Jesus? Simon is Simon Bar Jonah. Well, why is Simon Bar Jonah? Because there were other Simons that existed. He wasn't the only Simon in the world. So we also have to figure out, when we're tracing these names, are they talking about the exact same person? Is the Agag, king of the Amalekites, the Agag being mentioned in the incident with Saul? And so there's a lot of work here. And I'll be honest, when I was thinking about the book of Esther, I was thinking about how it could bless us tonight, given the present crisis. I wasn't necessarily thinking about the apologetics. So I don't want to take away from that. But if I were to do that again, I would do the research. And then I would figure out whether Agag, who was the king of the Amalekites, is the same Agag. Clearly, it says that Haman was an Agagite, but I noticed it didn't say he was an Amalekite. Well, now I'm asking a question. Why is he an Agagite, which indicates he's from Agag, and he's not listed as an Amalekite, descendant of Amalek? So, again, while I didn't necessarily do all the homework on all the apologetics questions, you can see the way my mind's trying to harmonize these things. What I have is testimony from the scripture as to who Haman's descended from. I have that same name used in terms of Saul killing him after Samuel tells him he better. Pretty much you've disappointed God, get it done. But what I don't have is the direct descendancy from the Agag of there to the Amalekites which attacked under Moses. What is the exact relationship and how does that work? So David is a Judahite for one simple reason. The Israelites got broken down according to Judah, which was the predominant kingdom in the south. And so he is named after his tribe because of the settling of the tribes and the fact that Judah is really supposed to be the kingly section. So that's kind of where it is. It's a reference. Judah is part of Israel, but not every Israelite is a Judahite. And Judah becomes a prominent tribe. And it becomes significant given Genesis 49, where the scepter shall not depart from Judah until Shiloh, which could be understood as Asher Lo, him to whom it belongs, comes. And so David's descendancy from Judah is important to the Messianic line. So that's why that's there. Let me continue on. I hope, a few rabbit trails are allowed, but that's why that's there. The problem is that Mordecai needs Esther to go to the king. And Esther in chapter 4. Now, remember, we're doing kind of an overview. Okay, this is a little bit of an overview to talk about Purim. She can't just go into the king any old time. Now, you guys who know and love Esther, you know this, right? You know what a risk it is for her to do this. Now, we're going to get to a really neat part here, so stick with me because she says something very interesting. She says something to Mordecai, and Mordecai says something back that's fascinating. She says that all the king's servant and people of the king's provinces know. See, this is stuff you should know. Okay, that if any man or woman goes into the inner court of the king, notice it's the inner court. That's kind of interesting to me, given the tabernacle. That ancient kings had an outer court and an inner court, and in the same way, God the king had an outer court to the tabernacle and an inner court. Kind of interesting, because that's sort of God's place of residence with the people and sort of his throne room. Who has not been called, he has put there. He has but one law, all to death, except the one to whom the king extends his golden scepter, that he may live. Yet I myself have not been called to see the king these 30 days. So it's been a month. So they told Mordecai Esther's words, because Mordecai is going to want to talk to Esther. Now Mordecai is going to reply to this, and I want you to pay a little attention to this. Okay. Esther continues talking first. She wants some divine help. So she says, go gather all the Jews present in Shushan, fast for me. And that's why Jews have a fast right before Purim. Neither eat nor drink for 3 nights. It's 3 days, night or day. Now, we don't do that anymore. Okay. It's a 1-day thing called the Fast of Esther. And I will fast likewise. Then I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Esther's first message is, this is going to get me killed. Her second message is, please have people fast for me because I'm going to do this thing. Okay. And really, I didn't include it, so I'm going to read it because Mordecai's charge to Esther before she gives her answer includes an important word that should be in here. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read it for you. I'm going to give you the section here. Okay. Because I want you to hear Esther's challenge to Mordecai's challenge to Esther. Now, she agrees to go. She tells Mordecai what's going to happen, possibly, what the danger is. She asks for fasting, but this is all in response to what Mordecai says. And I want you to hear Mordecai's words for just a second. Actually, they're coming up anyway. So I'll just let the text do the work for me. No, actually, we jumped. So let me read this to you. Mordecai told them to answer Esther, do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all other Jews. If you remain completely silent at this time, and my dear sister will appreciate this, because this is the famous verse here that is just so cool that many people know, okay? But you and your father's house will perish, yet who knows whether you come to the kingdom for such a time as this, okay? And in 14, there's a word used here. Relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. Now, originally in my original slide, and it must have got erased when I was going to do this in Vermont, I talked about that word place. Help will arise from the Jews from another mekum. Now, what's interesting about the word mekum is that the rabbis later use it to refer to God. And that's why they believe that God's name, God is mentioned in the book of Esther in a veiled way, because they started referring to God as the place. Now, why did they refer to God as the place? And this was all in the original PowerPoint, but when I went to change it, I think some things got skewed up a little bit. So I may be tempted to put both PowerPoints or give you the one from Vermont, which has a little more of this information in it. This is terribly interesting because the holy place was the place where God dwelled. Okay, the holy place was the place where God dwelled. In fact, the Holy of Holies is where God dwelled. And the holy place was connected. Remember, inner court, sort of outer court? and it was the throne of the king, and so it was the place. And so God got associated with the place, and eventually, because God was the source of the holiness and meaning of that place, and his presence was in that place, he began to be known as Mekum. The term Mekum is used to refer to God. And so I find it kind of funny. Now, I'm not going to push this too far, but I think it's really neat when you get these veiled sort of things that just might be there. Um, Help will arise from another place. God will provide help from another way. Is literally what he's saying to her. Yes, I appreciate that. The Talmud does say that the Shekinah went into exile with them to Babylon, and I'm familiar with that. So someone is just mentioning that, and I think that's a really good sort of point to put up. Um, Esther went in, of course, she touched the top of the scepter. Why a scepter? Now, this is fascinating too. Check out Numbers 24:17. A scepter was a symbol of rule, right? This is Balaam prophesying. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall arise out of Israel, and batter the brow of Moab, and destroy all the sons of tumult. And Edom shall be a possession, share also its enemies shall be a possession, while Israel does valiantly. Out of Jacob one who shall have dominion and destroy the scepter shall arise out of Judah. Why a scepter? Because it's a symbol of rule. And in this case, the rule is related to the messianic rule, and the scepter is the Messiah himself. He who touches the scepter is safe. Now, think about this for evangelism purposes for just a second. I like to tell people if the blood of the Lamb is not on the doorpost of your heart, then God's judgment will not pass over you. How about this? Okay? How about this? If you want to approach the great king of the universe, then you need to have connected with the scepter which he promised. If you want to have fellowship with the king and be accepted by him, you need to have come under or in contact with, in your heart, you need to have had your heart changed and touched by the scepter of God, which is Messiah. How's that for a neat little picture here? I hope to street preach again, and it would be great to open Esther up and do some sort of thing out of Esther and talk about deliverance, or Passover and talk about deliverance. You know, when I was doing Leviticus with the Bible study that I'm doing at Hillside, which we're probably going to have to eventually curtail, but we have less than 10 people. So I think we can go one more round here and be pretty safe. And we're all sitting pretty far from each other. We might just try it, but let's try this for just a second here, okay? Um, Look at what this ends up doing. I mean, there are these cool redemptive images in the Old Testament that you can turn into ways of pointing out to people you cannot enter the presence of the great king without the scepter. And the scepter is Jesus. And if you have not come in contact with the scepter, then you cannot enter the presence of the great king. Oh, I'm getting excited and evangelistic. Wow. Um, Same charges are used today. I'm going to point this out because history is repeating itself. Representative Ilhan Omar recently complained about the political influence in this country related to the Jews and says it's okay to push uh, essentially that Jews have a foreign allegiance. They are a people who are different. They have allegiance to a foreign country. It's called the trope of dual loyalty. If you want to see it, I got it from Atlantic.com, which is Atlantic Monthly, and it's the dual loyalty trope. So there's a Haman running around today. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't say it any other way. There's a Haman-like person running around today making the same charges that Haman made, and her name is Ilhan Omar, and she's making the same charges. I mean, I almost feel like a representative should open up to the charge of Haman in the book of Esther and say, look, guys, for us who are Bible believers, we're seeing it all over again. There you go. Someone did it again because Haman's name was mentioned. We live under another authority too. But that doesn't mean we have dual loyalty. We're to seek the peace of the city. What are the believers to do? But this isn't our home. But while we are pilgrims here, as First Peter calls us, we're to seek the peace of the city. How do I know that we're under another authority? For he is the head of the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn of the dead, that in all things he may have the preeminence. Colossians 1:18. And so we're under another authority, but we're still to seek the peace of the city. Messiah is the scepter of deliverance, the stone which was rejected by you builders, which has become the head, the chief cornerstone. Nor is there salvation in any other, for there is no other name under heaven among men by which they must be saved. By the way, Rabbi Singer, look at this, Rabbi Singer. Look at the imagery used here. The cornerstone, the scepter, the star. How can you ignore this imagery? They were viewing their scriptures through messianic eyes and seeing the way Messiah ends up being the ultimate of these. And it was not a wrong way to interpret in their day. And see, this doesn't look to be the PowerPoint I intended, but let me just put this down and minimize this for just a second. First of all, let me make an important point for us who live in these troubled times. There is deliverance for the people of God. We are pilgrims in a strange land, and it's getting stranger and stranger, and weirder and weirder. But even though we're strangers, we're to seek the good of the city. And while we're sitting here seeking the good of the city, we can be assured of God's deliverance. The God who delivered the children of Israel will indeed deliver us from the present crisis. Now, I don't know how that's going to be, and I don't know the way it's going to work out, but he will deliver us. And I hope that people who tune into this do get something out of it, because I think this is an incredible message for our day. I think the need for the scepter and I think the need for deliverance are very real. And so, really, I hope people will see this, and I hope they will get something out of it. And I hope they will have the hope that the deliverance of God, which was present for Esther and the people, children of Israel, throughout the empire of Xerxes, is available to us today, and we can experience his deliverance. And I don't know if the apologetics ones, are more to liking, but I think there is value in this message right now when people are scared to be able to say, yes, there's a way you can have deliverance. Yes, there's a way you can be delivered from the Haman that isn't a Haman, but is called the coronavirus. And you need to touch the scepter of the high king, which is Messiah. You need to come into his presence and accept him so that you will be saved. And the other thing is, this is coming attractions. It could get worse. There is, I'm not foretelling the future here. I'm saying that judgment will come. There's a bigger judgment than the problem with the coronavirus that people need to worry about. I think that's a fair thing to tell people. And so, yes, there's deliverance. What else did I end up saying? Well, look, I want to say that it is right to seek the good of the Jewish people. And for us to be here, let us seek to be under the scepter. Let us seek to keep close relationship with God. Let us seek to be able to use this incredible story in our lives right now. So, um, again, the interesting thing that I didn't put on here is Saul refused to kill Agag. Eventually he does it, but he sort of delays. Mordecai finishes what Saul started. God works intergenerationally. Isn't that interesting? Solomon finished what David started. God works intergenerationally. Not only is God interested in you, but he weighs generational lines and he works intergenerationally. And so we need to understand that God's long term in his thinking. And so who knows what effect generationally, not just individually, you can have. And that also gives us an understanding. I'm not trying to be too, but maybe God knows what generations will do. And he has to have some people come on earth who don't get saved in order to bring forth the ones who will serve his kingdom in such a way that they will leave witness to others. It's just an interesting sort of thought. Well, there were some side questions. Let me get back to those side questions because I want to deal with them. Okay, I don't want to leave them behind. What do I think about a Jewish bride marrying a Gentile husband? In Esther, and a Gentile bride marrying a Jewish husband, is there any ramification? The homily that I got to preach at my own wedding. When me and Marlene got married, I delivered the homily. We modeled it after that. Marlene is not Jewish. She's very well acclimatized, but her line doesn't have that direct connection that way. Now, that will raise ire with the rabbis as far as the Jewishness of my kids. I did have one pastor refer to my children as little Samaritans. I was exceedingly displeased, and I lovingly pulled him aside and said, "My children are not Samaritans," because it's really like calling my children half breeds. And I really didn't like that. Now, I did it very lovingly, but no. We could discuss patrilineal descent and matrilineal descent, but I referred to in the homily that very much like the church, you have a Jewish bridegroom, a Jewish bridegroom and a predominantly Gentile bride, or a Gentile bride in this present era. There's a Jewish remnant, but the majority of the body of Christ is Gentile, and so you have a Jewish bridegroom and a Gentile bride. And Ruth is read during Pentecost or Shavuot, which is when the Spirit is given, which unites Jew and Gentile together and is the gift, in a sense, the engagement ring of the Spirit given by the bridegroom to the bride. And so I think it's terribly relevant. And so I use that as a homily at my own wedding. So I have my Ruth. And to borrow from a pastor friend of mine, I guess without her, I'd be ruthless. But that's his joke because his wife's name's Ruth. But my wife is a Ruth in a way, who has come to the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob through the Messiah and has come under the wings of the promises to the fathers. Check out Romans 11. So it's terribly relevant. What do I feel about a Jewish woman marrying a Jewish man? Well, interestingly enough, the rabbis reckon Jewishness through the mom. I think that's non-Torah-like. It's actually contrary to Torah, interestingly enough. But if you want to go rabbinically, they should have no problem with it, right? I think God's in charge of what he does. God told Hosea to marry a woman who, at the very least, was not a sterling example of the most obedient Israelite in the universe. And I think God sometimes uses our lives as living illustrations of truth. And so I like to say, who am I to quibble with God? There's a book of Esther. There's a book of Ruth. Get this. There's a book named after a Gentile woman in the Hebrew Scriptures. Take that, you know? That's pretty incredible. So that's my answer to that. I started answering some of Jonathan Williams. Why do I believe that this is not written by men? One, it's in the canon. God determined the canon in my mind. So if it's in the canon, it's written by God. It's what God wanted in his book. So that's one reason. Two, although God is not specifically named, his providence is clearly seen in the book. So that's another reason. I believe that the promise of help arising from another place indicates that God was in charge, and the connection, the way this book links Ezra and Nehemiah and Daniel in the canon, showing what was going on with the exiles in relationship to the time period when Israel was in Babylon. It functions as an auxiliary book to Daniel in such a way that I have every reason to believe that it fits the canon. So when I look at the big story, this book fits perfectly in the big story. So it's part of canon. It serves a unique place in the big story. It shows or demonstrates God's providence. It demonstrates God keeping his promises to the fathers and the Abrahamic covenant, even though Israel is in disfavor because of their violation of the Mosaic covenant. And so there are plenty of reasons to believe, although this book is not appear extraordinary on the surface and it's more providential, to believe that this is indeed a divine book. Also, Jesus okays the Jewish canon. He says you've killed every prophet from Abel in Genesis to Zechariah son of Berechiah in Second Chronicles. Esther appears before Second Chronicles, which is the last book. Jesus knew the order of the books in his day. He mentions a prophet at the end, that's Z. He mentions a prophet at the beginning. Notice, Abel to Zechariah, A to Z. A to Z. And so since Jesus okays A to Z and Esther's in A to Z, I have Jesus's word that Esther records the deeds of God and is inspired. So that's my short answer to that. And longer answers, they may exist, but I'm giving the short answer. Well, I don't have any cool music that says that our time is up tonight. I could break into the VeggieTales song. We know, what we have learned. Anyway, let's not do that because I don't have the voice for it. But I think it really applies to us. Let us hunker down in the positive way, believing that we will experience the deliverance of God. I don't know what that will look like for you, but I know that we as believers need to have that knowledge that the God who protected Esther, Mordecai, and all the Jews in the Persian Empire can protect us from the Haman of the coronavirus also. So that's where we're at. I see a future relative. I'm so excited. I've got to say hi. I have a dear young man who I have many reasons to love is in the room. And so I won't tell you too much about him because that, might be beyond the scope there, but I got to wave hi. This is so exciting. I know this was an overview, folks, but it's an overview with a message. It's an overview. You know what they used to say in certain circles? It'll preach. It'll preach, guys, and it should preach. And so I'm so excited to have everyone here tonight. I'm going to take a little bit of time. We're still assessing everything going on with us. It has been a whirlwind. I know it is for you. Let me close in prayer. I don't know how YouTube feels about this, but I know how God feels about this. So I'm gonna jump in and take a risk. By the way, our numbers are up. We've got 2 more subscribers. We're only about like 6 or 7 from breaking the next level. So go us. We can make it. I think we're about 7 away, and then we unlock the next level. And so we're slow but steady. but slow but steady wins the race. Let me close us in prayer. Our Father, our King, you are the high King. You are the great King. You are the King of creation. These are troubling times. These are hard times. But if you can save from a Haman, if you can deliver from a Haman, you can deliver from a coronavirus. We need to think like those. We need to go back to the standing stones of our faith, the places where you did things in the past, and take them in and apply them to us. What is true for them is true for us. You can see us through. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know what impacts this will have, but we know that when the smoke clears, you are God, and we have come under your scepter, who is King Jesus. And we have taken that scepter and we have accepted him as our king, and we have given our allegiance to him and thus our allegiance to you. And we have touched the scepter, so deliverance is ours in him. Thank you that you have provided it. We come to you in the mighty name of Jesus. We don't do it flippantly. We do it because that is the name by which we can approach you, and that is the name by authority. Jesus said, all authority is given to me on heaven and earth, and in his name and his authority, we trust you. And we bring these things before you and our needs before you and our communities before you in his precious name. Amen. Well, that does it for tonight, and I'm thrilled for everyone who was here. Click the subscribe button, click the like button, and that is Esther in an hour. That's Esther in 60 minutes. Isn't that neat? And that's where we're at. I'm going to say good night, all. I almost want to say good night, y'all, but I'm not originally from the South. I don't know how you say that in Chicago. I'll say it like this. I'll do it in Hebrew. Lila Tov. Good night. Lila Tov. In fact, I can do that. Let me do this. I'm going to try this. This is cool. This will be fun. I'm going to try to type in good night in Hebrew real quick, if it works. My keyboard should come up. I've got a complete Hebrew keyboard. There it is. I'm trying to see it. The keyboard comes up, but it doesn't necessarily show real well. Okay. I wish the keyboard showed a little different. Okay, there it is, Lila. And then I'll just put Tov real quick. There it is, Lila Tov. Boom. There you are. So that's good night, y'all, and that takes us through the evening. Bye. Stay well. Stay safe.